We must create more and better jobs. We must stop the rise in the cost of living. We must protect the dollar from the attacks of international money speculators.
The dollar and the U.S. economy aren't real. They are an illusion of progression and fairness. The reality is the American dream has been levered up and sold right out from underneath us. And today we're going to listen to 3 inflationary presidents, Nixon, Carter, and Ford, so that I can remind you guys how truly evil inflation is and how powerful public unity really is. The biggest weapon of we the people is unity. Now, in addition to these classic speeches, I'll show you guys the new recessionary warnings, the data indicators, as well as the inflation-induced asset prices. And I'm going to show you guys the new update on the derivatives market, which is way worse than you can ever imagine. Now, we're going to end this video with a new powerful document that Mitch Vexler has created and sent into the Texas Attorney General as well as the SEC to try to help hold these tyrants accountable for robbing us of our liberty and right to happiness. Working to pay off our credit card interest or our mortgage interest debt is debt slavery. It's not the pursuit of happiness. And having said that, happy Wednesday. Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. You guys already know that this video is going to be absolutely bonkers. Mitch Vexler, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you today?
It's another interesting morning. I'm actually working on follow-up documents to the Freedom of Information Act that was sent to the Attorney General via FedEx last night. Now, Travis has a copy of it. Several people in the press now have a copy of it. It was also sent to the SEC, DOJ, FBI, U.S. Attorney General, and I'm now working on the follow-up document to the Texas State Auditor. So, interestingly enough, I received a little memo about it this morning, and it was 5 or 6 paragraphs, but it laid out the case of what I'm doing is directly correlated to what Michael Burry did in 2008 with regard to the housing mortgage crisis. It was a pretty good write-up. It's well done. So the point of the matter is these things are in play now because the government itself here in the state of Texas, we'll see what they answer on this Freedom of Information Act, but I believe Travis will post that document below this video, and it would be a good thing for everybody to read.
That's right. And we have faith in you guys that you will access that document and you will read it, because reading that document is going to show you how we've boxed in the state officials to act. And we're just asking them really to do their job. It's crazy that we have to go to this amount of effort just to have them do their job. Either way, let's start with the first segment, which is the new recessionary indicators. Coming out a few days ago, August 21st, is the Conference Board LEI. So when I go down here, I want to show you guys a couple of things. First of all, there's another gauge called the CEI. They track 4 component indicators: payroll, employment, personal income, less transfer payments, manufacturing and trade sales, and industrial production are included among the data used to determine recession in the U.S. So this is something to look at in incoming recession. So the LEI continued to inch down in July, and that is in blue. You guys see in blue, it's going down. And generally when this starts to go down, we're either headed to recession or, as you guys see in this chart here, we're already in recession. Now, the interesting thing is when I scroll down here and we look at this chart, the LEI's negative growth rate and low diffusion index over the past 6 months, we have another recession signal triggered in July of 2025. You can see that little red there. Now, the interesting thing is this has been triggered 3 times already post-COVID, not counting this one right here. And you guys can see back here, usually this is a pretty big, pretty accurate indicator that we're already in recession. You guys can see that here with the global financial crisis, as well as the dot-com bubble in red. So we've been propped out of a recession. That's what this data is saying. To me, this is saying, again, certainty. We're already in recession. The only reason it doesn't show it in GDP is either data manipulation or inflation. But let's go on to the yield curve. Looking at the 10-year Treasury and the 2-year Treasury inversion. Now, obviously, this uninverted around September to October of 2024. Another recessionary indicator is the inversion of the 10-year and 3-month Treasury. This is a more accurate index to check right here, the inversion. Now, also the interesting thing is this is still inverted. So the 3-month and the 10-year has been on and off reversion this entire time, going all the way back to right here, which is December of 2024. Now, here's what's important to understand. Essentially, the 10 and the 2 is uninverted. The 3-month was uninverted. Now, I want to tell you guys the historical norm. So here it is right here, the 10-year and the 2-year. So normally we enter recession, if we look at the median, 17 months after the uninversion. And right now it's been about 11 to 12 months. So if we look at the historical median, we should be going into recession, according to just this, in about 5 months. But when we look at the 10-year and the 3-month, the normal time after uninversion into recession is 13 months. So according to that index, we've been, well, it's not fair to say because we're inverted, but if we look at when we first got uninverted as far as the 10-year and the 3-month, that was around December of 2024, which would indicate that we have about 3 to 4 months to go if we look at the historical norms. Another recessionary indicator is the Siam rule. Now, I want to explain this real quick. This is an economic indicator that signals the onset of a recession by tracking changes in the unemployment rate. The model asserts that a recession is extremely likely when the 3-month moving average of the national unemployment rate rises by at least 0.5% or 0.5% above its lowest point during the previous 12 months. The rule offers a simple, timely, and accurate method for identifying economic downturns. Now, the interesting thing is this. In 11 recessions since 1950, the Siam rule has been triggered every single time. As of right now, okay, so this is right now's data. Most recently, as of June 30th, 2025, U.S. unemployment is 4.1% prior to the revisions. They always revise this with a 3-month average of 4.17. This is 0.17 above its low for the previous 12 months. So right now, it's not been triggered. But I wanted to remind you guys, it was triggered on August 2nd of 2024 when the U.S. Department reported unemployment rate of 4.3%, surpassing the unemployment rate's 12-month low by 0.53%. So it was triggered, but then all of a sudden it was removed. On top of that, I want to go into consumer confidence and consumer spending. So this is a new survey that came out a couple days ago, actually yesterday, August 26th. Okay, this is what this is saying. Labor Day serves as both a celebration of American workers and an opportunity to reflect on the economic challenges that we face. And there's a couple key stats here. Number one, economic pressure mount. 55% of people think tariffs and inflation are erasing their hard work. Number two, working harder for the money. 70% of people say they're working harder this year than last year for the same amount of money. AI anxiety. 2 out of 5 Americans are concerned that artificial intelligence will take their job. The next one, the struggle is real. Nearly 3 in 5 Americans say it's not easy to get a job right now. Call for support. 93% of people think companies should offer financial wellness tools for employees. But I'm going to say, just go on YouTube and start learning some stuff. Last thing here, Labor Day budget. Nearly 3 in 5 Americans say they don't have a budget for Labor Day spending. This article came out 2 days ago on August 25th, titled U.S. Consumers, and here's the key word, with prime credit. So the people with really good credit are starting to slip on payments. And I'm just going to read this little bit right here, okay? U.S. consumers with the highest credit scores are starting to fall behind in debt repayments. Credit scoring company Vantage Score said in a report published on Monday, in a sign that Americans' financial health may be deteriorating more broadly. Late payments over 90 days were up, okay, year over year, triple digits, 109%, with the prime segment or really good credit segment being up 47%. Year over year, all recessionary indicators. Job openings for construction. And what I wanted to show you here is normally the construction job opening goes down into the recession. You guys can see that here. .com bubble goes down into the recession. GFC goes down into the recession. Even the last one, the lockdown recession right here. And look at the trajectory. So the trajectory is plummeting, and yet they're saying we're not in a recession yet. All of the data that we just went over could signal we actually have been in recession. All employees for construction. So the interesting thing here is you're not seeing a recession when it comes to actual jobs in construction. That's very interesting, but you do see that it's plateauing. Before I ask Mitch if we'd already be in a depression without inflation, I want to listen to this video. It's going to be 4 minutes long from Richard Nixon. This is such an important video because he's going to talk about unjust enrichment. He's going to talk about how horrible and bad inflation is. He's going to talk about price freezes, you guys. And the biggest thing of all, he's going to talk about ending the gold standard. Listen to this.
The second indispensable element of the new prosperity is to stop the rise in the cost of living. One of the cruelest legacies of the artificial prosperity produced by war is inflation. Inflation robs every American, every one of you. The 20 million who are retired and living on fixed incomes, they are particularly hard hit. Homemakers find it harder than ever to balance the family budget. And 80 million American wage earners have been on a treadmill. For example, in the 4 war years between 1965 and 1969, your wage increases were completely eaten up by price increases. Your paychecks were higher, but you were no better off. We have made progress against the rise in the cost of living. From the high point of 6% a year in 1969, the rise in consumer prices has been cut to 4% in the first half of 1971. But just as is the case in our fight against unemployment, we can and we must do better than that. The time has come for decisive action, action that will break the vicious circle of spiraling prices and costs. I am today ordering a freeze on all prices and wages throughout the United States for a period of 90 days. In addition, I call upon corporations to extend the wage price freeze to all dividends. I have today appointed a cost of living council within the government. I have directed this council to work with leaders of labor and business to set up the proper mechanism for achieving continued price and wage stability after the 90-day freeze is over. Let me emphasize two characteristics of this action. First, it is temporary. To put the strong, vigorous American economy into a permanent straitjacket would lock in unfairness. It would stifle the expansion of our free enterprise system. And second, while the wage price freeze will be backed by government sanctions, if necessary, it will not be accompanied by the establishment of a huge price control bureaucracy. I am relying on the voluntary cooperation of all Americans, each one of you, workers, employers, consumers, to make this freeze work. Working together, we will break the back of inflation, and we will do it without the mandatory wage and price controls that crush economic and personal freedom. The third indispensable element in building the new prosperity is closely related to creating new jobs and halting inflation. We must protect the position of the American dollar as a pillar of monetary stability around the world. In the past 7 years, there's been an average of 1 international monetary crisis every year. Now, who gains from these crises? Not the working man, not the investor, not the real producers of wealth. The gainers are the international money speculators. Because they thrive on crises, they help to create them. In recent weeks, the speculators have been waging an all-out war on the American dollar. The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
Mitch, specifically my question is, without the current inflation, which is just bonkers, out of control, wouldn't we already be not even in a recession, but an economic depression? So can you answer that question? And then also, if you want to go into any of the price freezes or, going off of the gold standard and what that really did to us as a country, I'd welcome that as well.
Would we be in a depression? More than likely, but the point of the matter is we're not, because the data is cooked. And kicking the can down the road, there was an interesting word that you used. It was historic norms. Well, the norms don't matter, historic or otherwise, when the data is cooked. Because it's an evolution of what happened at that point in time in history. And as we've come into the current history, as people are now beginning to wake up, which is that the CPI is nothing more than a giant lie. All the data is cooked. The value of your home, be it the assessed dollar on your home, that data is cooked. We've proven mathematically that give or take between 78 and 92% of the data at the central appraisal districts is corrupted. So the global situation is that the narrative works until one morning you wake up and it doesn't. And that's when people who understand how to trade it are going to get really busy, because they will make a lot of money to the short side. So that ramification is exactly why we are asking, by virtue of all these filings that we're doing now, the state of Texas, you're caught. These documents are real. The Freedom of Information Act is real. I already know what the outcome is going to be. This is why we're asking the state of Texas to meet with the federal government and put a floor under this before all hell breaks loose. And if the crisis of confidence occurs, that means the situation has gotten out of control. And if it gets out of control, you won't be able to put it back. So all these documents that we're pushing out are with that sole goal in mind: force these government entities to do their job, get together, and put a floor under this. With regard to your question about the inflation, well, inflation is caused in two areas. One of which is the US Treasury printing money. That's clear, we've documented that. The other one of which is the central appraisal districts, by virtue of overvaluation and overtaxation, running the values up for the sole purpose of supplying enough money to cover off the interest on the outstanding fraudulent bonds that the school districts have done. That means that the school districts and the central appraisal districts are committing accounting fraud and bond fraud. With regard to President Nixon's comment about the US currency, he's right. It is the world's reserve currency, but markets change and the world has changed. So he's speaking based on what it is that he knew or was being told at that specific time in history. And when he says international money speculators, well, we had one of those on our side of the table. His name was George Soros, and he broke the Bank of England over this type of nonsense. Markets move, the world ideologies change. We are paying the price for being the world's reserve currency, but we are what we are, and that has to be maintained. The problem is it's connected to credibility. And remember, what I said a few seconds ago was the crisis of confidence. If there is a crisis of confidence, which we are dancing on the doorstep as we speak, otherwise I wouldn't have drafted all these documents that we're drafting, to make that point adamantly clear to the state of Texas, including the state of Texas Attorney General, you've got problems. And you have to do your job, and you don't get to ignore what your job is in favor of whatever the net result is of you ignoring your job and who's getting the money.
Money is their job. And here's the thing that does stay the same, Mitch: math. 1 + 1 still equals 2. All of these changes that we have, the math stays the same and the debt gets bigger. I want to move on to our next segment, which is inflation. So I want to talk about inflation and inflation-induced asset prices. Let's start with the deficit. So we have an update on our deficit. This is not yet the end of the fiscal year, but we're at $1.6 trillion of overspending. This is spending that the government is doing from money that they don't have. And also we have to service this debt. So even though it only says 1.6 trillion, it's probably more like 2.2. And that's up 7% year over year. So that's not a good thing, you guys. And when I scroll down here, you guys could do the same thing. And we look at the deficit printing during recession. I mean, they're keeping us out of recession right now. Here's where we're at right now. Here's where we're at during the global financial crisis. They are literally right before our eyes. You can see it in the math. You can see it in the inflation. They are kicking the can down the road via inflation. We have an everything bubble right now. This is the Wilshire to GDP ratio, or what a lot of people call the Buffett indicator. So this is looking at the stock markets. And you guys, our stock markets right now, from any fundamental mathematical calculation, It's never been as overvalued and overpriced as it is right now. The reason that's important to understand is it's got a long way to go down. The potential downside risks are out of control right now. Again, this would have already crashed and gone down, probably right here, to be honest, and kept going down. But the inflation, bank term funding program, things of that nature, and it's not just stocks. This is the home price to median household income ratio. We are at right now, according to this data, 7.3 years of salary to pay off your home. Back during the global financial crisis, it got to about 6.8. And during look at this, during the 70s and 80s, when we were fighting inflation, look at how low it is. It was so low here. So the difference that I want you guys to understand between our inflation battle right now compared to the past is the prices. Asset prices are through the roof. Richard Nixon, you just heard, said, we're going to freeze prices because it's that bad. Well, they didn't do that this time. And this is what you're looking at right here. Home prices way overinflated, just like the stock market. When we look at U.S. debt to GDP, if you don't want to just look at trillions of dollars, just the percentage, you can see that the last time we were at where we're at right now was World War II. And we were at 121%, and then it came crashing down almost immediately. Well, right now it's staying elevated. We got to about, look at this right here, you guys, about over 125, and we've stayed up. Look at that. And right now, here's a crazy thing. It's still going up. Debt to GDP is getting higher because the debt is not being paid off. The big problem with all this and why mom and pop can't afford it is obvious from this chart right here. Real median household income, which is adjusted for inflation during the cost run-up or the inflation asset bubble, income went down, meaning they took our money, they took our future wages, and they just pocketed it. And not only do they pocket it, asset prices also skyrocketed. So for the elite and the rich, this is a win-win situation because they're going to now make money on the flip side of things. Because remember, it's a pendulum, right? They're trying to keep it up here, still going down. They're trying to keep it up, but it's swinging. And people are going to make money off of this part of the swing. And hopefully you will too. You have to maintain your purchasing power. And we know the Federal Reserve loves doing quantitative easing because they get to buy stuff from us. And they buy it and they keep it. And you see that right here because they got $6.6 trillion in assets, most of which are mortgage-backed securities. So if the Federal Reserve gave us that $6.6 trillion right now to help pay off the debt, we would probably be in a much better situation. Before I ask Mitch what a blow-off top is for assets, let's listen to Jimmy Carter give a speech about a crisis of confidence. Listen to what he has to say.
After listening to the American people, I have been reminded again that all the legislation in the world can't fix what's wrong with America. So I want to speak to you first tonight about a subject even more serious than energy or inflation. I want to talk to you right now about a fundamental threat to American democracy. I do not mean our political and civil liberties. They will endure. And I do not refer to the outward strength of America, a nation that is at peace tonight everywhere in the world, with unmatched economic power and military might. The threat is nearly invisible in ordinary ways. It is a crisis of confidence. It is a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our national will. We can see this crisis in the growing doubt about the meaning of our own lives and in the loss of a unity of purpose for our nation. The erosion of our confidence in the future is threatening to destroy the social and the political fabric of America. The confidence that we have always had as a people is not simply some romantic dream or a proverb in a dusty book that we read just on the 4th of July. It is the idea which founded our nation and has guided our development as a people. Confidence in the future has supported everything else. Public institutions and private enterprise, our own families, and the very Constitution of the United States. Confidence has defined our course and has served as a link between generations. We've always believed in something called progress.
Mitch, obviously, I'm not sure that any Americans, not many Americans anyways, are confident in how our government is not only treating the world, but also treating their citizens. In fact, I'll say over the last 2 years, my confidence is gone. I have no confidence in any of our politicians or government. And that hurts to say, but anyways, you comment on what Jimmy Carter said if you want, but specifically, Mitch, if you can explain to the viewers, what's a blow off top, right? So we have these mega high asset prices from the inflation, direct result of inflation, and the weapon of mass destruction, which is levering up our debt. And right now it's 48-1. I'll show you that, guys, in a minute. But what is a blow off top, and how does that work as far as asset prices are concerned?
A bubble can be blown and a market can stay solvent a lot longer than the investors of that marketplace. From a technical perspective, a blow off top is a parabolic move. So the market goes parabolic, and then typically you'll get a pullback of that range, 0.618, and then it will take another move up and hit a double top. If you hit a double top, that could be considered a blow off move. If you hit what's called a triple top, which coincidentally, I just looked at the NASDAQ chart a minute ago. If you look at the daily, it's on its way to what's called a head and shoulders, which is also a triple top. Either one of these things can be called a blow off move. However, with that said, like I just reiterated, the market can remain solvent a lot longer than those who are participating in it. Doesn't mean that the market won't continue to go, but when you have a lower high and a lower low, that becomes the signal that the market has reversed. And technically speaking, that is a triple top and or where we're about to be on a head and shoulders. Caveat emptor, buyer beware. For those who can trade to the short side, best you start studying. That's where the money's going to be. With regard to Jimmy Carter, he needed a better speechwriter because he had the opportunity to do something in that speech and he blew it sentence after sentence after sentence.
How?
The crisis of confidence is an issue of math, right? Inflation was running hot. They couldn't control it. They didn't know what they were doing. And they refused to listen to those who understood what was happening, i.e. Milton Friedman, to put that genie back in the bottle. This is history repeating itself. In other words, it goes from administration to administration to administration because of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve gives the edict, we have to print money to get out of this. They keep printing money. It is the compound cumulative effect. And that goes right back to what Nixon was saying. The world changes over time, administration to administration. But what doesn't change is the compound interest calculator. The math keeps running. The bonds keep running. Aside from a kinetic bomb, what is the world's worst weapon of mass destruction? It's compound interest. And that's where we are.
You know, Mitch, speaking of compound interest, that's going to be a nice transition into our third segment, which is the derivatives. And the ending question is going to be, are financial markets looking now to leverage up crypto? Let me first show the viewers what we're talking about as far as derivatives. As of 2021, this is saying that we had $600 trillion, okay, in derivatives versus the netted value or the real value of those derivatives, which is 12.4 trillion. The important thing to understand here is the derivatives market on average, and as of 2021, is leveraged up 48-1. The derivatives market is helping to create a floor under asset prices and to keep the fraud going and the inflation going. This article came out from Gibson Dunn, August 22nd of 2025, titled Derivatives, Legislative and Regulatory Weekly Update. And here's what I'm wondering. Let me read this first thing from the Derivatives Practice Group. This week, CFTC Acting Chairman Caroline announced that the CFTC will begin its next Crypto Sprint initiative to implement the recommendations of the President's Working Group of Digital Asset Market Report. Everything's literally at max capacity. That's why we have the reverse repo market, or we wouldn't have the reverse repo market. I'm worried that the they're now liabilities, but the assets that we already have, they're maxed out. And now they're looking for the next best thing, which in their minds is crypto. and now they're moving to leverage up crypto, which would induce more inflation. Mitch, are you worried that, and we'll get to Jimmy Carter here in a second, but are you worried that the derivatives market is now going to start leveraging up crypto?
Of course they are. That's what markets do. I mean, that's a no-brainer question, right? I mean, when you have tokenized assets, that doesn't give you physical possession. That gives you, well, I own a token. And it's a digital tokenized asset. You still run into the same problem. What's the face value? What would be the value if you held it in your hand? Well, how do you hold a fraction of a coin that's tied to an asset in your hand? You can't. It is a pure speculative instrument. End of story. You want to trade it? You want to be speculative? Do what you want. But if you think there's value there, you would be wrong. Now, if it's backed by a hard asset and it's legit, ounce by ounce, precious metal to precious metal, no issue. That eventually will work. They are testing that now. But as I said before, until some sort of regulation comes down that explains what this is, there's nothing wrong with speculating. Those who want to trade the, I think it's MBL, which is the micro Bitcoin, or MBC. If you want to trade it, fine. You're not going to get severely hurt. Just don't be stupid. But the point of the matter is it's speculative. There's nothing holding it other than its future idea of what it could be if the US government decided we're going to take it and we're going to make it work. For those who think that they're going to hide assets from the IRS through these Bitcoin operations or crypto, you're horribly wrong. They know exactly what's going on under the hood. So that begs the question, okay, if it's all broadcast and everybody knows what's in there, you do have a little bit of secrecy by virtue of the ledger, but the ledger is traceable. So what's the point?
It's not leveraged up yet.
Exactly, which is exactly why they're going to do it. They're going to keep promoting it. They're going to keep prompting it up. They're going to say, well, we just raised $1 billion based on this. But it's not as if that what they raised is a production of anything other than a speculative, and I'll put in quotations, financial instrument, because there's nothing backing it up. It doesn't work until it's backed by something concrete that doesn't have a diminutive face value. And that's the problem that the Federal Reserve's got with the Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae bonds. What's the stuff really worth, right? The reverse repo is taking it at face value, but we've already proven mathematically that these houses are worth at least 40 cents on the dollar less than face. What is it worth? All of that becomes the crisis of confidence. When the banks wake up and the banks say, well, wait a minute, you're asking us, a bank, to finance these school district bonds, and what are they based on? Fraudulent overvaluation, thus fraudulent overtaxation at the hands of the school districts who have committed accounting fraud? And you want us, the banks, to pay for this and finance this? When the banks wake up, they should be hitting the panic button and put an immediate freeze on all bond raises in the state of Texas.
You know, Mitch, this is a long way away from Nixon and what he was saying about the economy back in the 70s. We have drifted so far from the principles that these people were talking about. And when you say, like, based on, I'll tell you what mom and pop's life is based on, why we're out there working so hard, working 2 jobs, sending our children to a daycare, which is a public school system. For us, life is supposed to be based on liberty and the pursuit of happiness, not paying and getting these C-suite, oblique corporate elites rich. Why do they need more money? They run things already. Stop taking our money, which brings me to our last video, which is going to be of Gerald Ford, and he's going to talk about whipping inflation. And then after that, we'll go into the final document.
But in the end, I had to make the decision. I had to decide, as each of you do, when the roll call is called. I will not take your time today with the discussion of the origins of inflation and its bad effect on the United States. But I do know where we want to be in 1976, on the 200th birthday of a United States of America that has not lost its way, nor its will, nor its sense of national purpose. During the meetings on inflation, I listened carefully to many valuable suggestions. Since the summit, I have evaluated literally hundreds of ideas, day and night. My conclusions are very simply stated. There is only one point on which all advisors have agreed. We must whip inflation right now.
He failed to talk about the math. You guys see how they're using inflation and what we go through as normal mama pops as propaganda to continue to look good, right? To me, that's what it looks like. Or they got good intentions and it's just not working, but it's not about good intentions anymore. It's just about the math. And I'm going to tell you guys, okay, Mitch, especially Mitch, he's not lost his will. He's not lost his way. I'm going to show you guys his sense of community purpose. Here is the most recent document that Mitch made, dated yesterday, August 26, 2025. And this is to the Attorney General Paxton, Ken Paxton. And I'm going to read a few things here. I'm going to show you guys what he's asking for. And then we're going to talk to Mitch about why he sent this. But this is trapping the state of Texas and forcing them to make transparent all of the things that they're supposed to be doing. Because we're like, well, you can't be doing what you're supposed to be doing because the math takes out lies. The math takes out propaganda as long as the data inputs aren't fraud. And that's the problem with the other data. It's fraud. It's not comparable because they keep changing it. But listen to what this says and look at the angle that Mitch is taking to get these guys. So first of all, this is what it says. It's just a few things here. Dear Attorney General Paxton, enclosed, please find a revised formal request submitted under, and this is how he's attacking them, Freedom of Information Act, thank you, Jesus, and Texas Open Records Law. This Freedom of Information Act request is the result of information obtained over several years, including via lawsuits, stonewalling by government entities, and information coming to me from across Texas, which evidence of oversight failure leads to a realization that the circumstances in a societal issue. It is my sincere desire to obtain the information request herein in an effort to head off a major economic issue regarding bond financing for the school districts and the state of Texas, while simultaneously provide a workable solution. And that is what we've been saying this whole time. We're not trying to fight people. We're not trying to shame people. We're just trying to say we can do this, but we can't ignore the math anymore. We just showed you guys decades of presidents and administrations that have been ignoring the math and just using words to advance their fake agenda. This goes on to say, these requests seeks records, audits, verifications, and opinions related to the oversight of the Central Appraisal District, where I was just assault and battered, or rather the CAD, the State Comptroller Property Tax Administration, the school district's interactions with the CADs, and related enforcement actions. And this is going to be linked in here, so you guys can read this whole thing. It's 17 pages. The purpose of this request is to ensure transparency, accountability, and compliance with state and federal law and the administration of property taxation in Texas. The request records concern oversight authority, enforcement practices, appraisal accuracy, both financially, affordability impacts, and allegations of fraud or improper conduct within the appraisal district. Such a good, they got nowhere to go after this, guys. And again, I'm just going to read a few things here. This is critical situation overview. Okay, so again, this is to the Attorney General. A comprehensive investigation has uncovered systemic municipal bond fraud across Texas, mirroring the SEC's successful, and you guys probably didn't know this, 2022 prosecution of Crosby Independent School District here in Texas. The evidence reveals a statewide pattern of fraudulent property valuations and bond misrepresentation that threatens both state financial stability and national municipal bond market integrity. And it kind of goes on in the pattern and practice. Again, this is a beautiful, beautiful document. Now, the first thing he's going after as far as the evidence he's requesting is the OAG, or the Attorney General's authority, roles, and enforcement. He's asking for the manuals, memos, training, and or guidance. And when we go down here, it's a lot of stuff. Number 2 is the audit, reviews, or investigation of the CAD comptroller or school district. And number 3 is criminal statutes, obstruction, and RICO references. He's asking for anything at all that you guys have been investigating, State Attorney General, about RICO. Number 4, due process, equal and uniform and ARB evidentiary standards. Okay, where's the uniform? Where's the equal? You're not following the law, Central Appraisal District. Number 5, comptroller property value studies, or PVS, and mass appraisal standards, because you're not using them. Number 6, conflicts, governance, and board composition. 7, licensing. We want to see all of the disciplinary actions for these things. Number 8, data integrity, falsification, and retention. 9, school bond communications and risk. We want to know what you guys are talking about. What are you talking about behind our backs? How are you getting away with this? How are you hiding everything? 10, specific Denton County items. Okay, so they're going after Denton County. 11, OAG audits, reviews, and investigation of ISD bond compliance or CAD appraisal practices from 2017 to present. Just give us the information. We're going to put it in the courtroom of the public, because the public needs to know what you are doing, what you're supposed to be doing, and what you're not doing. Number 12, godly ISD bond procedures. The SEC has this. Mitch has all kinds of people working on this. I love this one right here. Communication, emails, letters, and IMs about bond counsel, municipality advisors, underwriters. He's going after all of the underwriting, rating agencies, and trustee. And the reason that's so important is because I highlighted this next thing. Part of the underwriting is supposed to show the ability to pay. You can't show us the ability to pay when in 15 years, bond debt has gone up 6 times. 6 times the amount in just 15 years, and I'm talking about Texas. 14 is the 313 tax abatement agreement. Some very complicated stuff. I finally figured it out. Thank you, Jeff Mashburn. He's also asking for preservation. To the extent not already in place, please preserve potentially responsive records, including text IMs and cloud files, during the pendency of this request. So he's saying, don't delete anything. And then obviously he signs this. This has been sent out. I have a few questions about that document, and I apologize to the viewers. I couldn't read everything, but it is in the description. It is on our Facebook group as well. But Mitch, I guess my first question is, why is this the route you're taking? Why? Because I've seen you've put in overwhelming amount of effort, time, energy, and finances into that document. So can you explain to the viewers why you're taking that route, what you're hoping to gain, and how people can help?
The reality is that a cacophony of issues have occurred, and we have been prohibited from getting and exposing the evidence in a courtroom, although the evidence is deemed admitted. And I'll touch on the amicus brief in a few seconds here, but it's important that the Attorney General may and or may not be colluding with the state comptroller with regard to controlling the narrative, that then the reality that nobody is doing their job. And that's what this document is going to end up showing. There's multiple questions in there that I already know what the answers are, but we're asking the questions to prove the point. The state comptroller is the sole signator under the Texas law to ensure that there is money available to pay for these bonds. Well, we've proven mathematically that no, there isn't, and it is impossible to pay the bonds off. The money doesn't exist. The median household income doesn't exist. The compound cumulative interest on the outstanding bonds has jumped the principal. There's no way to pay this off. So again, the point of the matter is we're doing this to prove the point. Bad things have happened. Let's call it, if you wish, for the last 20 years. But the compound cumulative effect of those bad things are that the state of Texas is going to have to sit down very quickly with the federal government and come up with a proper floor. This is going to have to be fixed. This is going to be painful. There is an issue with who on the bond holders is going to get paid back or not paid back, or how much they get paid back. That's not in my purview to discuss. What is in my purview to discuss is we've got the bill that Helen Kerwin has, and that does fix the problem for mom and pop. It does not fix the problem for the bonds. That is why, be it the Attorney General's office, whether Mr. Paxton is there or not isn't the issue. It's the Attorney General's office. It's Governor Abbott himself. It's whoever is going to be taking the place of the state comptroller. It's kind of interesting that they're all leaving, but nonetheless, whoever's in that office going to have to sit down with the federal government. They're going to have to figure out how are we going to pay these bonds back if possible. And that leads to the crisis of confidence. I'm trying to avoid that crisis for the benefit of everybody. And for whatever reason, I'm in the middle of this because it's just the way that the circumstances lined up. But there's a lot of people on my side of the table that are looking at this and putting this information together and helping me put it together. But nonetheless, the information is the information. It is the facts. There's no debate as to what has happened here. The math is the math. The law is the law. The problem is that those in charge have refused to enforce the law. Now, does that become an issue for the SEC to do investigations on the state of Texas? Maybe. Mail fraud through the Post Office Inspector General? Maybe. DOJ, FBI, criminal complaints against those who didn't do their job? Yeah, probably. Do people deserve, or several people deserve, to go to jail? You bet. Don Spencer's one of them. I've stated it publicly. I'll reiterate it. However, that's the short problem here, not the long problem, which is how are these bonds going to get paid off?
Mitch, I want to specifically talk about how people can help. Now, obviously, guys, I'll have the Facebook group linked in the description. Join the group. These are all advocates fighting to eliminate property taxes, fighting to make the public aware about the sky-high ISD bond debt. But there's another form of help that we need, and that is basically an amicus. If you're an attorney, if you know an attorney at all, if you've been following along, if you're a patriot, and if you want to help, we need help with an amicus. Mitch, can you explain that amicus and how an attorney can help you, and how we'll have an example of the amicus linked in the description here? But can you explain, and can you reach out to the people that have a law degree that could potentially help us?
CEOs, accountants, attorneys, district attorneys, bankers, anybody that touches this problem financially, if you wish to sign an amicus, please reach out to me and I'll get you kind of the background as to what it is. But it's important to understand that the case that's in front of the Texas Supreme Court has a 2023 issue. We found out about the bonds at a later date. And the issue is that the court is only going to want to hear what it was raised in 2023, except the courts have made a mistake. And they made a mistake given the Supreme Court's own precedent under Patel. And there's many issues, but what we're saying is, Supreme Court, please remand this case to the lower court so that it can be heard in the lower court, where the evidence can all come forward. We want to talk about the evidence. We want to ask these people very specific questions live on the stand as to what happened. We want that to happen. Now, when the case is remanded, in theory, the SEC will step in and take over this case and run it up to the federal level, which is where it should have been from day one, but we couldn't do that because of the structure inside of Texas. We're getting very close to getting this to the federal level. Remanding this case will get it there quickly. And again, this is about speed. And I don't know if this market will crash tomorrow or in 12 months from now. What I do know is that the interest clock is ticking by the nanosecond, and that these bonds cannot be paid off. And frankly, either can the interest on the bonds. This is compound cumulative. So with regard to the remanding, I just want to go through a couple of points. Federal law is applicable to the sovereign immunity defense. In other words, there is no sovereign immunity defense. They're guilty. That's exactly what is shown in that document, the Freedom of Information Act. Any state that avails themselves to access to the bond market gives up sovereign immunity. The bond guarantee program for the state of Texas is insufficient. The defendants did not defend against the claims of inflation, so they can't say this is a tax case, which is what they've done, which is why the courts made a mistake. They have to answer directly to the claims. The arguments that they have will not save them. The fundamental issue is the power to tax and to lien, which is something that needs to be judiciously contained, being the ability to affect the equity in an asset and to place upon that asset claims which need exacting laws. Equity stripping is not lawful. The law should not be allowed to produce moral hazard. The appraisal system is unchecked and unmonitored and a hazard to the bond issuance and the bond guarantee program. Now, there's more of these points, but those 3 points alone is exactly why the Freedom of Information Act request to the Attorney General was created. There's no way out. They're in a box. The goal here is to force the state, before this problem blows to shreds, go to the federal government and come up with a solution. The state of Texas has literally caused insolvency issues with regard to the bonds. They signed off on it, they sanctioned it, they allowed it to happen, and regardless of which division, it doesn't matter. They all point the finger at each other. Do you know that we have filings literally stating this with TDLR, TALCB, State Comptroller, all 3 of which have responded with, well, it's not within our purview. We don't have the authority. We've got all this in writing. Well, Attorney General Paxton, what did you do about it? How many of these videos have we produced? How many letters did I send you that I've sent to your office? How many emails? And yet nothing. The one response that I got back from the Attorney General was, well, this case isn't ready for me yet. Okay. How exactly is this not ready for you yet? I look forward in all sincerity to getting the answers to that Freedom of Information Act, because it's going to prove exactly what we've been jumping up and down about. And that's not even the big issue. The big issue is the key word, insolvency.
And what Mitch is really saying here to the state of Texas is, hey, we're going to need some help from the Fed. And the more help we get, the more controlled demolition. If it's just total implosion and total demolition, there's going to be carnage everywhere. But if it's more controlled demolition, it's going to be better. And I say demolition because it's mathematically impossible to undo what they've done to us already. Mathematically impossible. And obviously, I'm talking about the bonds, the derivatives, the inflation, everything, you guys. Now, again, really appreciate you if you followed along this entire time. This is going to be probably about an hour long, so I hope you guys made it. Everything is in the description. Don't forget to go to the Facebook group, linked in the description. Don't forget to look at the Freedom of Information Act. It's in the link in this description. If you're an attorney, reach out to Mitch. I'll also have a link to an example of the amicus, but I'm going to say this one more time. Probably I'll say this a lot, actually. We need your help. Now, other than that, if you guys are out there just trying to figure things out, end property tax, and live a life pursuing happiness, we wish you luck, and we hope you win.